These days, there seems to be a new food truck parked in almost every New York neighborhood, selling everything from schnitzel to burgers to gourmet ice cream. It's had a major impact on the traditional mobile business model of coffee and bagels, hot dogs, and shawarma. And for a new generation of chefs, it's a way to test out their recipes without going bankrupt. But the food truck movement is not without its detractors, and a bill was recently introduced into the city council that could threaten their existence. Kim Ima of the Treats truck and Vadin Ponorovsky of Frites and Meats are part of the new wave of food truck entrepreneurs. Very pleased to welcome them to our show, along with Sean Basinski, the founder of the Street Vendor Project, a legal resource for food vendors. Hello.
Hello, Leonard.
Thanks for having us.
Vadin and Kim, how did you get into the mobile food business? Let's begin with you, Kim.
I've always loved street food and the life of New York City on the street, and I loved baking, and I just came up with the idea of the treats truck and just fell in love with it and just thought this is what I want to do. I just love this idea.
So you're baking desserts?
Baking desserts, cookies, brownies, all kinds of treats.
And Vadin?
Well, since I was a young kid, I've always had a wide entrepreneurial streak running through me, and having traveled the world on my stomach, I was kind of drawn to the food industry, and decided that what New York City needed was some high-quality burgers and Belgian-style fries on a truck.
Well,
And
you'd worked in traditional restaurants before you moved to the
I
street
have.
truck business,
I own a restaurant currently in the meatpacking district. It's called Paradu, and after being in that, this was a natural transition into this business as well.
Well, what does having a food truck offer you that a restaurant doesn't? Is it less expensive? Is it the fact that you can, if business is lousy, you can just drive to another location?
That is true. I mean, you can try a block and think, this is going to be fantastic. Then it's a little slow, so you move a few blocks over, and all of a sudden you found the right fishing hole, and people love it, and they're so happy you're there.
Sean, didn't you have a food cart a long time ago, in 1998?
I did, Leonard, a long time ago before I found that it would be a lot easier to be a lawyer, and that my skills are more in organizing and representing vendors than myself actually selling food.
What were you selling?
I sold burritos on 52nd and Park Avenue.
So was it a food truck, or was it something more like the kinds of things that we see where people grill hamburgers and hot dogs?
Yeah, no, it was a smaller cart. I didn't have the money, or I guess I never thought of actually having a truck as many people do now, which offers you some more flexibility.
So let's say I wanted to sell something that I make at home, homemade ice cream out of a truck. How would I go about even setting up a mobile food business?
It's not easy, is the first thing. The city makes it very, very difficult to be a mobile food vendor on the street. There are limits on the number of permits that are available, and so and additionally, you have to go through a lot of paperwork. It's very difficult even to figure out what the rules are sometimes, Leonard. It can take years, and really, it's a situation where the city has been punishing our smallest businesses by making it so difficult for vendors to even exist.
Are there different rules for food trucks versus the food carts of the sort that you used to run?
Basically the same rules, although of course, food trucks are also subject to parking regulations, whereas carts on the sidewalk are obviously not.
So you said that there are all sorts of different permits and licenses that you have to get. What kinds of things?
Well, for example, before any a cart or truck gets a permit, you have to take the cart for inspection at the Department of Health, way out in Queens, and they have to look everything over. A lot of times they'll fail you the first time. And then even on the street, when you're selling, just like any restaurant, it's important to know that the health department comes around and inspects mobile food vendors quite frequently and gives them tickets for various things, not having a hairnet, having food at the wrong temperatures. And so the regulation that already exists is really strict and quite extreme.
If I may, I just wanted to also add to that. The laws that exist on the books, whether they be for governing food vendors, food trucks, or restaurants, are essentially there to protect the consumer.
I was about to ask about that.
And those laws, whether we may view some of them as being out of date, like the current milk expiration date law that's about to be changed, or in any other way negative to the business. Those are laws that exist on the books that have a fundamental concern for the consumer. The law that we are being faced with now, this legislation that's being proposed, is without sounding apocalyptic, is the kind of law that has been used since the beginning of mankind, that is incredibly discriminatory, targets a small minority that is essentially powerless for redress against the law, and levies very punitive punishments against them. You know, there are no, what laws can you think of that would essentially take a person's business away into which they have invested money, effort, years of time due to parking tickets?
Well, we'll come back to that. It's a law that says if you have more than 3 parking tickets.
3 parking tickets in a year, yeah.
Well, you know, they take away if you speed, if you break the law when you're
Absolutely.
driving.
We're a food business.
People are often punished. But I'm curious
Yeah.
about the making of the food. As we pointed out earlier, there are some health concerns. Kim, you have used a kitchen in Red Hook.
I do.
Do you have to follow the same kinds of rules that restaurants do? Because restaurants, they can come into your
Oh, sure.
your kitchen.
My kitchen gets inspected, and I have all.
They
my,
check out the hot
Oh,
water and
right,
and
everything.
the coldness of the refrigerator and whether there's rodent
Of
and
course.
insect infestation.
Yes, the cleanliness, everything. And also, do we wear gloves? Do we cover our heads? Do we wear aprons? There are many rules, and there are spot inspections.
Does that apply to everybody who's a food truck? Because some of those places look like they're really kind of fly by night, Sean.
Well, sure, it does. It does apply. You know, some carts are cleaner than others, and we encourage all carts to be clean. And we think that the health department has an important function in regulating the safety of food. And you know, it's true that some carts are old and they're not, and they may not be as shiny as others. But you know, this is just the nature of the business. Just like restaurants, the very same thing. Some restaurants look great, and some restaurants, you know, may not look so great.
So when you wanted to get into the business, Vadin and Kim, did you have any trouble obtaining the permits necessary to open your trucks?
It takes, you know, it takes a bit of doing. It's like Sean said, the city limits the number of permits available, so you have to, you know, find ways to work within the system to make sure that you can have a legal permit, and so that you can conduct your business. It's essentially just, you know, like with anything else in doing business in New York City, there are inherent costs and inherent bureaucratic issues that need to be addressed.
And what happens if you ignore that?
Then you are operating an unlicensed business, which in any business will result in you losing your business. You know, because if you do not have a permit, you're not allowed to do it. That does not, however, prevent people from doing it.
And also, sometimes it's hard to get the right information. Sometimes it's hard to get clear information about how to go about it, even if you want to go about it the right way and get the right licensing, the right permit, and figure it all out.
Where did you have to go first?
Well, I started befriending other vendors, and I would go up to an ice cream truck and just say, "Excuse me," I'd get a cone, and then say, "Do you mind if I ask you a question or two?" And a lot of vendors were just so helpful to me.
Well, the ice cream vendors, the Mr. Softies are subject to the same rules as somebody who sells cookies?
Absolutely.
They're truck
meat.
permits, and also any person who gets on a truck or works at a cart or sells from a fruit cart has to have a food vendor's license at all times showing.
You just pulled yours out.
Mine is
Right.
on my neck at this very
Which
moment.
is actually a more stringent regulation applying to food trucks than to actual brick and mortar restaurants. In a brick and mortar restaurant, if an inspector comes in, only one person in the entire restaurant needs to be able to produce a food handler certificate. Whereas if you're on a food truck and you have 4 people on staff on the food truck, an inspector comes, each one of them must produce a valid license.